Heinz Guderian has gone down in history as a general with a brilliant mind and unwavering determination, and is also considered one of the main architects of modern warfare. His bold tactics and deep understanding of blitzkrieg not only changed the course of events in World War II, but also left an indelible mark on military history. Guderian had the great luck that others did not have, to be able to leave memories in which he could leave an image of himself as heroic and honorable as possible. However, what is true in all these statements? What was General Guderian really like? What were the issues in which he had the greatest interest? Next, thanks to David Stahl's book, entitled The Panzer Generals Uncovered, in which he compiles a lot of information extracted from Guderian's personal letters, we are going to analyze a series of very personal and unknown curiosities about this Panzer general. The first issue that we are going to see in the program is the importance that a general like Guderian gave to fame, and whether it was something that worried him or not. There is no doubt that the vast majority of German generals wanted important positions within the army, where they could achieve great achievements on the battlefield. They all knew that certain victories would fill them with glory, and although they may lie in their memories, the reality is that it was something to which they gave a lot of importance. When Operation Barbarossa began, frontline German generals like Guderian were kept busy at the forefront of the advance, barely having time to think about anything else. However, as they began to obtain the first victories of the campaign, many became interested in seeing how these events were sold in Germany, and to whom they attributed the success. On the morning of June 29th, just a few days after the German offensive began, Guderian wrote a letter to his wife in which he told her to pay attention to the radio and the news so that she could see who was being awarded the glory. This did not arrive until the first days of August, when General Guderian was finally named in the national and international news. Until that date, he was complaining that the merit he achieved on the battlefield was attributed to Marshal Bach, who commanded Army Group Center, in which Guderian's 2nd Panzer Army was included. One strategy that Guderian and other generals used was to force German correspondents to photograph and record them, so that they would later include their photos and footage in their reports. Furthermore, and as if that were not enough, at the beginning of September 1941, Guderian was thinking about hiring a famous German writer to write a biography about him, with the aim that the whole world would delight in his great feats in Poland, in France, and now in Russia. However, when his wife told him that the writer greatly exaggerated the facts, and that his feats could be considered unserious, Guderian finally decided not to carry out this project. So, he went so far as to say that he did not want to become someone like Rommel, about whom half of the things that were said about him were lies and greatly exaggerated. The next curiosity takes us to a meeting that Guderian had with Manstein, in which they both talked about the new property that Guderian had just acquired. You all know, and we have discussed it in many programs, that Hitler kept his generals happy by giving them a lot of extra money and even large properties. In Guderian's case, his time came at the end of 1942, just a few months before he was appointed Inspector General of the Armored Troops. To regain the loyalty of Guderian, who had been fired almost a year ago during the battle for Moscow, Hitler gave him a list of huge estates in East Prussia, so that Guderian could choose one and keep it completely free. All of these farms had land of more than 1,600 hectares and were majestic. Guderian's greed was so great that after visiting them all he stayed with another one that was not on the list and that he had 2,800 hectares of land. Although the estate belonged to a former Polish officer, there was no problem expelling him from his property. On one occasion, Marshal von Manstein met Guderian and the two had this conversation. "Tell me, Guderian, I heard that you have acquired an estate in the province of Posen. How has it been?" Manstein asked. To which Guderian responded that they had given him a list of Polish estates and after visiting them, he had stayed with the one he liked the most. Manstein asked him, surprised by who the owners were and what he had been through with them. Guderian told him that he did not know who the real owners were, and that when he arrived, they had already been expelled from there. So, he had no idea what had happened to them. As a final piece of information before closing this section, we have to indicate that the crops that belonged to the farm generated more than 1,000,000 marks a year, making the Panzer General and his family quite rich. We are not going to dwell much on curiosity number 3, because it is quite related to the one we just saw. This alludes to the importance that many of these senior officers gave to rank, because an increase in rank meant a considerable increase in salary, and a position of greater prestige within the army. Thus, and as many of these private letters reflect, Guderian, along with other generals, had strong desires to be promoted for this series of reasons. The fourth curiosity of the program is Guderian's vision of Hitler and the Third Reich. Although when the war ended the vast majority of generals tried to separate themselves from everything that had to do with Hitler, his government, and his way of doing things, the reality was very different. The vast majority of generals were very happy that a man like Hitler was in command in Germany, and had put an end to the decadent Weimar Republic. Thanks to him, all the conditions of the Treaty of Versailles had been corrected, and Germany was strong again, with a German army that had no rival. This, after all, was the wish of any high-ranking soldier, since he saw himself totally benefited from it. When on December 19, 1941 Hitler assumed direct command of the German army, when he proclaimed himself head of the Army High Command, Guderian was very happy about this event. His verbatim words in a letter sent to his wife were the following: "I am glad that the Führer has now at least entered the scene, and that he intervenes with his usual vigor in the bureaucratized machinery of the army, in the railways and other organizations." Later, and when everything seemed lost for Germany, Guderian was one of the main people responsible for the most desperate measures to continue sending all types of men to the battlefield. Once the war ended, Guderian was interrogated numerous times by both the Americans, the British, and the Soviets. In these interviews he went so far as to say that he had never agreed with Hitler, and that he was almost against his government. And finally, the fifth and last curiosity of this program will be Guderian's great stubbornness, and his strong personality, which time and again left his superiors and subordinates stunned. Throughout Operation Barbarossa, Guderian was characterized by demanding a continuous advance regardless of anything else. It did not matter if the infantry was far behind, or if the Soviet encircles were not completely closed and secured, because the main thing was to always advance at the highest possible speed. This way of acting caused him to have continuous arguments with many superiors and subordinates. These that we are going to comment on below were some opinions that were said about Guderian. When Guderian makes a decision, it is as if the god of war himself is riding through the valley. When his eyes light up, Wotan appears to shoot lightning bolts, or Thor appears to swing the hammer. The spark immediately jumped between us, and I was fascinated by this incredible personality. Guderian has the same energy as a bull, he is a fantastic man. The last opinion of this style from one of his field assistants was: "Everyone admires and respects this man, he is an extraordinary leader with outstanding ability." On the other hand, there were other negative opinions, which point out that Guderian was an intransigent man who did not accept any opinion or advice, and therefore, he never counted on anyone. Like other German generals such as Rommel, Guderian was characterized as a born stubborn man. Finally, and as an extra, we are going to comment on a real anecdote that a German subscriber sent me about his father, who was under the command of Guderian. My grandfather was in the 8th Panzer Division. One day while she was working on his vehicle using a wrench to loosen a bolt, she heard a voice behind him say, "Can I give you a hand?" My grandfather turned around, and that man was Guderian, who helped my grandfather. He asked him questions and listened to him. My grandfather respected him a lot. One day driving him, he was shooting from a position where he looked and saw that Guderian was standing on the hood of his Kubel wagon looking through the binoculars at him. Without a doubt, he was a general of soldiers. It should be noted that there is evidence that on more than one occasion, Guderian had to start shooting along with his soldiers, whether during the Battle of France or Operation Barbarossa. If you want to know more aspects of Guderian's private life, I leave you the link to another program we did about the interrogations they did to Guderian.